Welcome to the Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Ancient wisdom, modern life, and the way. Visit us online at taoananda.com or find us on all the socials. Now, the Modern Taoist.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Modern Taoist. My name is Kit Man, and today is a funny kind of reason why this episode came to be. I was going to do another episode about the definition of ego, and that will actually probably be the next episode because I had worked on it and got it pretty much finished and ready to go. And I got an email from a listener, and literally all it said was, "Hey Kit, Mondays, am I right?" And I just laughed at that because that simple statement, we all knew exactly what she meant, right? She didn't even have to elaborate. We all just went, well, yeah, okay. Mondays, am I right? And I immediately thought, okay, well, that sounds like there's got to be something there. I'm a very firm believer that things don't just come up for no reason. You know, we're all in this flow, trying to go in the direction that we're supposed to go. And when things come up like that, I immediately go, okay, well, there's a reason she reached out and said a simple statement like that, like Mondays, am I right? And so I started thinking about Mondays, and two things occurred to me about Mondays. One of them is people use it as an excuse to treat each other like garbage. People use it as, oh, it's my Monday. It's Monday. We don't even just say it's Monday now. Now it's my Monday. So if you have to work on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and your day off is, or your next day back is Tuesday or something, you're like, yeah, it's my Monday. You guys know what I mean. I messed that all up, but you know what I mean. So people use it as an excuse to treat each other terribly. I'm not a big fan of that. Not a big fan of excuses to treat each other terribly, like coffee. I haven't had my coffee yet, so therefore I'm a jerk. No, sorry, that doesn't count. And another thing about Monday, what struck me and what I want to talk about today is how we tend to use Monday as a launching pad, a brand new beginning. I find it always interesting when people start something new. You want to start a new diet. It's always, let me eat like a maniac this weekend because I'm going to start on Monday. Once Monday gets here, I'm ready to go. And we treat Mondays like that about a lot of things, right? There's a weird kind of optimism that sometimes shows up on Sunday night. We may be dreading the fact that we have to go back to work, or we have to go back to school, or we have responsibilities that begin on Monday, but there's also this weird optimism because you start thinking about the week ahead and you picture yourself, all right, I'm going to be more focused. I'm going to be more disciplined. I'm a little more in control. And you see this version of yourself that finally gets it right. But I'm going to start on Monday. And you feel like, okay, this week the work's going to get done. I'm not going to have any distractions. All my good habits are going to click into place. And that feels kind of real on Sunday night. And then Monday morning arrives, and there you are, you're in it. And you're doing good, right? There's clarity, there's energy. You sit down, you actually do things you've been putting off, you respond to the emails, you organize all those tasks. And you move forward and you feel a little different. And this time you think to yourself, yeah, I got it. This time it's going to hold. But come on. If you're honest, you already know how this plays out. Not in some kind of weird theory, but in your experience. You know how this plays out because you've lived this before. Monday creates momentum. Tuesday still feels intact, even if there's a little resistance creeping in. And Wednesday, something starts shifting. A little more hesitation, a little more negotiation. You tell yourself you're back on track, but you got some effort going on. And then Thursday, oh, forget about it. That's when the cracks show up. And the things you said you were going to do to start the week start getting pushed, not abandoned, not given up, but moved, deferred. You tell yourself you'll make it up later. You think you're still in control of it, and then Friday shows up, and you realize you're managing everything. You're managing the story. You're explaining to yourself why you didn't get things done. It was a busy week. It was a weird week. It wasn't a normal week. You'll reset. You'll reset. Guess when you're going to reset. Guess when you're going to reset. Monday, right? Yeah. And then the weekend comes. You don't think about Monday anymore, and you start to feel loosened up, and all that structure and that chaos is kind of gone a little bit, and the attention drifts, and you move further away from that person from work, that work person. You become a different person, and your weekend person is there. And then Sunday afternoon, you start thinking about that Monday stuff again. And by Sunday night, you've convinced yourself that Monday is a clean start, a fresh start, a clean slate, a new week. And that cycle resets again, right? Because here's what we miss, what we never stop to question. Nothing actually resets. You don't start over because you've carried everything with you. The same habits, the same patterns, the same way of thinking, the same tendency to drift when things start feeling uneasy, the same need to recreate motivation instead of continuing the action. And Monday doesn't give you a new life. It gives you another chance to repeat the same old stuff, but just with different stories attached to it. And then you realize you're back in this loop. And if you stay in that loop long enough, you start to believe that the problem is effort or discipline or focus. You just need to want it more. You just need to try harder. You just need to lock in. No, that's not what's happening. You're not failing in bursts. You're drifting in cycles. We've talked many times on this show about patterns, right? Patterns don't just exist from when you were a kid to now when you're an adult. They form over time based on your actions. And now you're in this pattern of starting fresh every Monday, and that is the one thing that keeps this loop, this cycle alive. It gives you permission to let go without ever actually dealing with why you let go in the first place. So the real question isn't, how do we fix this whole Monday thing? The real question is, why do you need it fixed in the first place? Why do you keep needing a reset? Not occasionally, not every once in a while, every week. Why? It's not because you're lazy. That's too easy. That excuse in itself is lazy because it's an easy excuse and it doesn't hold up when you actually look at it. Because you know you're not lazy. You can be disciplined for 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 days in a row. You can focus, you can execute, you can follow through. Lazy people don't do that. So there's something else going on. You're not dealing with a lack of effort. You're dealing with a lack of continuity. You don't know how to keep it going once it stops feeling easy. And Monday works because it feels like a self-contained moment. It has structure. It has edges to it. It has a story attached to it. New week, fresh start. There's no friction yet because nothing has had time to resist you. You're moving inside of this controlled space that we call Monday. But real life doesn't stay controlled. And so by the time you hit the middle of the week, things have gotten jagged. You're tired. Something unexpected shows up. The work isn't like you thought it would be. The energy you had on Monday isn't there. And this is where the pattern reveals itself. Instead of continuing Through that friction and pushing forward, you start negotiating. You adjust your standards. You move the task. You tell yourself you'll circle back. You'll create just enough distance to relieve the pressure in that very moment, and not because you made a conscious decision to stop, but because you don't have a stable way to keep going when things feel off. And this is where Taoism comes in. People think discipline is about intensity, about showing up and being strong, about locking in, pushing hard. But that intensity is easy when things are clean. When you're locked into that structure, continuity is what shows up when things are not clean. You can always tell someone doesn't have any continuity when they're forcing themselves into resets. Because once your continuity thread breaks, you don't know how to pick it up in the middle, and so you have to start over. And so you wait. And you let Thursday slide into Friday. You let Friday blur into Saturday. Saturday becomes a completely different thing. You don't confront the drift because you've already made an unconscious decision that this version of the week is done, and I will do what? I will start fresh on Monday. You didn't fail. You dismissed. And once you dismiss, the only way back is a reset. And on Sunday, you tell yourself, I'll reset on Monday, and you feel relief. And that relief is what you get when you stop carrying the weight of what you didn't do. Relief that you can step into a new version of yourself on Monday. Relief that you don't have to deal with what you avoided now, because you can pretend it's gone and you'll deal with it on Monday. But it's not gone. You just moved it to Monday. And so when you sit down to start the week, you are not actually starting fresh. You're restarting everything you left behind, just with a different story. Same habits, same reaction, same breaking point, and the same pattern. You don't fall apart randomly. You fall apart at the moment where continuing becomes harder than waiting and doing a reset. That's where the line is. And until you learn how to cross that line without stepping outside of the task or the week, you're going to start rebuilding every Monday over and over and over again. And it's not because you're incapable. It's because you've trained yourself to stop and reset rather than continuing. So what do we do about it? If the issue isn't effort and it isn't discipline, then trying to come out stronger on Monday isn't going to work, because you're just reinforcing the same pattern. Short burst of clarity, few days of execution, right back to where you were. Restart on Monday. So what we need to do is we need to stop trying to start over and learn how to stay in motion. Most people are used to thinking in clean attempts. They divide their lives into segments. We all do it. This week, next week, this big push, that reset, all of that works kind of in our minds because it feels organized, but it's artificial. Life doesn't move in blocks like that. It doesn't move in calendar straight lines. You try to force life into a structure, you end up constantly stepping in and out of your own momentum. And from a Taoist perspective, there isn't a reset point. There isn't a moment where everything clears and you begin without any carryover. There is only, and you're gonna know what I'm gonna say, right? Because there is only what is happening right now and how you move within it. And that means your ability to continue matters more than your ability to restart. Where most people break is not at the beginning of the week. It's in the middle of the week when things stop being smooth. When your focus isn't as sharp. Something unexpected interrupts your plan. The work becomes less appealing. And that's the moment where the illusion of control cracks, and instead of adjusting, we step out. Push on to something later. Delay a task. Right? The Taoist lens doesn't treat that moment as failure. What does it treat? It treats it as a moment to notice. A point of contact with reality. You had a plan. Reality said the hell with that. Now you have a choice. You can either adapt right now in the moment and continue, or you can resist and disengage and reset. Most people don't consciously choose either. They drift through it. So the correction isn't about becoming more intense and more rigid. It's about staying present enough to respond to the situation instead of withdrawing. When something feels off, you don't pause the entire direction of your week. Adjust your approach inside that same flow. If your energy is lower than you thought, don't abandon your task, your work, your meeting, your family, or whatever. We're not just talking about work here, right? We're talking about how you live your life. So when your energy is lower than you think, don't abandon, scale it to match where you are in the moment and keep going. If your focus is scattered, don't wait for your focus to come back. Simply simplify. Simplify what you're doing so you can stay engaged. This is never about pushing harder. It's about refusing to break the line of continuity. Once your line stays intact, you stop relying on emotional resets, and you don't need the feeling of a fresh start to get moving again because you didn't stop in the first place, right? This concept right now, you may be thinking, okay, yeah, I guess, Kit, I get it. But once you can push through, things will begin to stabilize. Because instead of building your behavior around bursts of motivation, you're building it around sustained, in-the-moment movement. So your pace is going to slow down a little bit. That's okay. Quality might fluctuate a little bit. That's okay. Some days will feel sharper than others. That's okay. But the direction that you're moving remains consistent. Consistency is not about strength. It's not about speed. It's about direction. Direction, not perfection. Trademark, copyright. Direction, not perfection. Okay? The ability to keep going without having to rebuild the entire structure every 4 or 5 days. From a Taoist standpoint, this is simply getting back into alignment with how things already work. Nothing in nature, and you are nature, you are part of this natural world. Nothing in nature stops and restarts in the way humans try to reorganize their lives. Movement continues even when conditions change. Adjustment happens inside of that movement, not away from it. When you apply that directly to you, the weekly reset makes no sense. You don't need it because you're no longer depending on a clean slate. You're just working with what's already in front of you in real time. So instead of asking how we have a better start, you begin asking how you can remain engaged when things are no longer perfect. Direction, not perfection. That's what we want. Forward motion. Let's bring it down to something from the Tao Te Ching, chapter 64. This is one of the most misunderstood lines in Taoism. It's also one of the most famous lines in Taoism. The translation that I prefer, and there's many different translations, of course, as we talked about, but the line is, a journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath your feet. Some people say a journey of 1,000 miles begins with just one step. That's not quite right translation. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath your feet. That does not mean, I do not think that means what you think that it means. What movie is that from? You know it. Most people treat that as if it is a beginning, right? I need to start something new, and the journey, a 1,000-mile journey begins with just one step. No, what this actually means is it's pointing to the location of where you are, not the timing. Beneath your feet means where you are right now, not where you wish you were. The journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath your feet. It begins right now where you are. Not where you were on Monday morning when everything felt hunky-dory. Not where you think you need to be before everything feels right again. Right now. Right this very freaking minute is where the journey starts. You're listening to this, and your journey starts right now. And once you realize that everything begins right now where you are beneath your feet, that will change the entire structure of how you move through your week. Because the moment things stop feeling ideal, your instinct is to separate from the version of you that is standing right there. You feel scattered, so you tell yourself you're off. You feel tired, so you assume the day is over and compromised. So this day's lost. I've already screwed that up. And then you lose focus, and suddenly the work you planned or the things you meant to do or the relationships that you have or the conversations you needed to have, they don't feel accessible in the same way. So you create distance, and you tell yourself you'll come back to it when you're sharper, when you have more energy, when it feels like you again. And that sounds okay in that moment, but you've got to stop doing that. Because the journey begins right there beneath your feet, right where you are right there. There's the version of you that can act and the version of you that wants to wait. And if you let that split exist, the continuity is broken. You are now no longer moving from where your feet are. You are waiting to relocate your feet to a better ground. And then you have your reset. Taoism wants you to remove that option. Don't ask whether you're in the right state to move. Taoism asks what movement is available from the state that you're already in. That is two different things. And what it does is it forces a different response. If your focus is off, the answer isn't to wait for clarity, it's to narrow what you're doing until clarity arrives right then. If your energy is low, the answer isn't to abandon the day, it's to reduce the scale of the work, but keep moving. If you feel resistance, the answer isn't to push harder or step away, it's to stay with the task long enough for that resistance to settle. There's nothing, as I've said many, many times about Taoism, there is nothing dramatic about it. There's no surge of motivation. It doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It's just ordinary, and that's exactly why it works. Because what you're doing is removing the dependency on feeling right before you act. You're no longer trying to recreate the conditions of the best day. You're working with the conditions that actually exist in that moment. And once you're able to do that, you will shift in how you see yourself. You're not evaluating your identity based on how strong your start was. You're seeing how you respond to things when they aren't ideal. And that is more of an honest measure. Anybody can move when everything lines up perfectly. When your schedule is clear, when your energy is high, when nothing is pulling against you, okay, great. We can all do that. Congratulations. But that version doesn't tell you anything. The version that continues when things are crappy and uneven and when the day doesn't match your expectations and when you're not operating at your best, how you respond and keep moving forward tells you everything to know about where you are in your journey. And that stability removes the need for you to reset. Right? There's a moment that shows up all the time, and it's easy to miss if you're not paying attention. You're in the middle of the day, you've already been at work for a few hours, or you've been doing whatever task you're doing, working in the yard or cleaning the house or whatever. The plan you had in the morning isn't holding up in the same way, right? Things have taken longer than expected. Something throws off your rhythm. You are not locked in. Right there is your moment. That's your moment to notice. That is your moment to continue. Because you don't want that to turn into the rest of the afternoon and carry on into the next day. That gap, we've talked about it many, many times. That little gap, that tiny gap, that's what you're looking for. Because that tells you right there, from a Taoist perspective, the solution isn't to push harder or rebuild your structure. It's to remove what's interfering so you can move forward. Tao Te Ching, chapter 48. In the pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. Sorry about my phone. Let's try that again. From Tao Te Ching, chapter 48. In the pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. In the practice of the Tao, every day something is dropped. That applies directly here. When your day starts slipping, your instinct is to add something. More effort, more pressure, a new plan, a promise to reset later, a promise to remember to turn your phone off before you record your podcast. All of those things become more tasks. And all of those things create more distance between you and the work that's actually in front of you. You don't need a restart. A return is what we're looking for. A return in that moment to what you need to be doing. So how do you do that? It's not complicated. First, you pause. Not to escape, not to scroll. For God's sake, don't do that. Not to distract yourself. Stop for a moment and let everything settle. Breathe. No input, no noise. Just enough space to see clearly what's actually happening instead of reacting to it. Most of the time, the sense of being overwhelmed isn't coming from the work itself. It's coming from how many directions your attention is being pulled. So you stop feeding that. And then you drop. Not the responsibility, not the direction, but the excess. The extra things that you don't need to be doing right now or thinking about right now. The idea that everything has to get done today. The expectation that you need to feel sharp before you do something. Waiting for the perfect moment. No. Those don't exist. So you do the one thing in front of you that actually matters. Not the 5 things that you need to do. Not the whole list. One. And this is where people push back because they believe that feels too small. Feels like it won't make a difference. But that is exactly where movement from beneath your feet begins. One thing. And you're acting. You're not acting when it feels right. You're not acting when it's fully clear. You're acting right now. Do that one thing and move it forward. Might not be perfect. Might not be fast. Might not match what you wanted to do. None of that matters. What matters is that you're back in. You're not resetting. You're now in. You're back in the flow. And once that happens, everything starts to follow more naturally. Your attention will stabilize. The resistance will drop. The gap starts that was widening starts to close, not because you're forcing it, but because you're removing what's getting in the way. Most people don't even experience this because they don't take that first step back in when things fall off. They wait. They wait for a better state, a better time, a better version of themselves. And in that waiting, your distance just grows and grows and grows. And everything that is happening beneath your feet is on pause. So when you notice yourself drifting, when you get to that gap, do the return, not the reset, not the wait. My favorite Tao Te Ching chapter, well, one of them, Chapter 9, better to stop short than to fill the brim. A lot of people read that and they go, that's kind of lazy, isn't it? Like, but let me explain how it works, because people try to change their lives too often. Aim for the perfect week. Fully optimize that schedule. That can't be sustained. The moment the day doesn't match the standard, the whole structure falls apart and your pattern returns. Right? That's how continuity breaks. That's the pattern. You need to leave something in place so that the next step is available. That's how the continuity is maintained. So when you stop short, stay connected. Don't break the line. You're not pushing yourself to a point where the only option left is to pull away and recover. Just operate at a level that allows you to return again and again without resistance. That changes how you move through your day. Stop trying to win the week. You're not trying to stack perfect days or chase a version of yourself that only shows up in perfect conditions. Work inside what is actually happening right now, and you'll see that things will change for you. You'll get to the end of a long day, and there's still one thing sitting there. Maybe it's an email you've been avoiding, a conversation with your loved one that you need to have, a piece of work that isn't finished. Maybe it's something simple that would take 10 minutes if you sat down and did it. And the old pattern says, nope, you're done. You've already put in enough. You'll get to it tomorrow. This approach is different. You don't try to clear everything. You don't try to overhaul the evening. You don't turn it into a second work session, but you do complete that one thing. Not because it's urgent or because it couldn't wait, but because completing that one thing will keep the thread alive. Doesn't mean add more things to it. Doesn't mean keep working past your hours. It doesn't mean any of that. It means keep the thread alive. Take a day where your attention never settles. Start things, stop, shift, come back, drift again. Nothing feels right. The middle of the afternoon, it's tempting to write the day off and tell yourself you'll reset tomorrow. Don't. Choose one task and finish it. If you have 6 things left to do and you want to blow off 5 of them, fine. But pick out one and finish it. One. That single action will change the trajectory of your day. It keeps you connected to what you're doing instead of resetting tomorrow. It prevents the distance from building to a point where returning feels heavy. Don't let your instinct to wait take over. Waiting doesn't solve anything. It just delays movement. And people may be saying right now, well, you just said don't fill the brim. Exactly. That's what we're avoiding. That's why we're doing the one thing that we can do that keeps us connected. And over time, this will build a different kind of identity for yourself. Not someone that relies on strong starts, not someone who needs perfect conditions, not someone who cycles between being on and off, but someone who doesn't leave. And I'm not talking about doesn't leave work. I'm talking about doesn't leave their center, doesn't leave their present, doesn't leave their now. They don't leave the now when things get uneven. They don't leave the now when energy drops. They don't leave the now when things take longer than expected. They stay connected to whatever capacity is available, and that connection, that ability to stay in the now, will compound. And that doesn't look super amazing to everybody else from the outside, right? There's no big, you're not going to get kudos for this one. There's no big moment where you realize that everything is clicked. There's no visible transformation. It's very quiet, and it happens inside you. Instead of rebuilding your momentum over and over, you're carrying it. You're letting it develop across days that don't feel perfect, across weeks that don't go exactly as planned, because you're staying beneath your feet. The real change happens internally, not in the reset. The real change happens in the refusal to leave the now. The refusal to step outside of what is happening right now. And once that becomes how you operate, the idea of starting over will start to sound silly. Not because you've mastered anything, not because you're some enlightened being, but because you no longer need a new beginning, because you never stopped in the first place. You don't need a different now because there isn't one. You're already in it. And you've learned to stay there. Right? At some point, you have to stop asking, when will things finally click? Not because they won't, but because the simple act of having that question keeps you waiting for a version of yourself that only shows up when the conditions are right. It keeps your effort tied to a feeling and your direction tied to a moment that has yet to arrive. You're constantly waiting for something to happen when you really need to realize that everything is already happening right now. Life is not going to reorganize itself for you to get into the perfect condition. Life unfolds unevenly. Some days are clear. Some days aren't. Sometimes hours move very quickly. Other times the days just drag on and on. Why does that happen? Because you're waiting. Right? This isn't a problem that needs to be solved. The environment that you're in is where you need to be. The question isn't how to eliminate the unevenness. The question is whether you can stay engaged inside of that unevenness. Most people never answer that question directly, and that's what I'm asking you to ask yourself right now and then try to answer it. Don't try to outmaneuver it. Don't look for better timing. Don't look for better structure. Don't look for better motivation. Don't try to build a version of your life that only works when things are perfect. Because the alignment that you're looking for is ready for you right now. Get in line with your center. Stay where you are in the moment. And don't fall for the tricks that your brain wants to play on you. Because your alignment will break and you will step out. Not permanently, but you'll step out just long enough to lose contact with what you were doing, and that's the cost. You're not a failure, you're not lacking effort, you have disconnection. You lose the thread. And once it's gone, everything, you got to do the reset. And it will feel harder than starting again. Because you're going to start that stuff again where you start reaching for a clean entry point. And you say it to yourself, well, Monday's coming up. I'll just do it then, I guess. Right? A new week, a fresh start. But what you left, it didn't stay behind you. It's right there with you. And the longer you wait to pick it up, the more it gathers weight in your mind. Not because anything has changed, but because you added that gap to it. That pressure. That sense that you need to get it right this time. That this next stretch, this one will be different. When you remove the idea that you need a better starting point, things will begin to settle, I promise. You'll stop negotiating with time. You'll stop assigning meaning to specific days. You'll stop trying to separate from who you are now to who you will be maybe then. And you begin to work with yourself in the moment. What's in front of you right now? What is the one thing you can do right now to remain connected? This is where you begin to learn the difference in definition between the word easy and the word simple. Because this won't make things easier, but it does make them simpler. Because there's less buildup, less expectation, less pressure to prove anything in a single stretch. You're not trying to create perfection. You're maintaining contact with what matters. And that changes your relationship to your own life. Because you don't look at a day and decide whether it's good enough. You don't evaluate a week as a success or a failure. You stop carrying the weight of needing everything to be perfect. Choose direction over perfection. Stay close. Respond to what you have in front of you. Keep going. It's a mindset shift, not a behavior shift. You're still going to have uneven days. You're still going to have moments where the attention slips, where your energy drops, where things feel off. That won't go away. What changes is you won't respond to it the same way. You won't step out of the way. And because you don't step out of the way, you don't need a way back in, and that is the difference. As you move into the next week, you don't look at it as a chance to finally get it right. You look at it as a continuation, not something new, something already in motion because of what is in front of you right now, and that's enough. And if this resonated with you, please follow the show wherever you're listening. That helps more than you can possibly know. And keep these conversations going, right? Feel free to ask any questions you have on the comments or send me an email. Go through the website, daoananda.org, daoananda.org or .com. Hit the follow on Apple or Spotify or Amazon Music. That one click helps the show grow. Don't miss out on future conversations. And tell somebody else about it if it helps. We get a lot of comments all the time. I gave this to my son. I gave this to my friend. I played this for somebody I work with. Leave a review if you choose to as well on Spotify. We'd appreciate it. I do actually read them. And your questions are always welcome. And thank you for listening once again to The Modern Taoist.
Thanks for listening to The Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Visit us online at daoananda.com or find us on all the socials. Please like or subscribe on this platform. And thanks again.